This particular painting is not part of the ones that Feyre shows to Tamlin, but I wish it had been. Because it would have been hilarious to have, like, here's a landscape, there's another landscape, there's the lake of sunlight or starlight that we've been to, and here's you and Lucian as pigs. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kat and this is the next part of the read-along, and we'll deal with chapter 22, 23 and 24. Chapter 22 starts out with Feyre admiring the massive bruise she has on her neck from where Tamlin bit her. And I'm just like, well, that's why everybody told you to stay in your room, but would you listen? No, you wouldn't. And then she tries to embarrass Tamlin with it by putting it on display, by, putting her dress down just far enough so everybody can see it. Except it doesn't work. He's just like, well, we told you to stay in your room. Why do you think we told you? And in the meantime, Lucian is just laughing his ass off about the whole situation. And Feyre gets really, really mad and runs off. After she's run off, she lets her anger out by painting little portraits of Lucian and Tamlin as pigs rolling around in their own filth. And those are the pictures that we need to see. Like, they should be on the cover, really. They would be much better than the actual cover. They do apologize to each other over dinner, and then Feyre just seems generally really happy to be there. The next evening, Feyre actually dresses up for dinner, and Lucian makes himself scarce. And Feyre and Tamlin have a romantic dinner together. And while they're just sitting there, and he says none of these things, but Feyre just makes up all kinds of deep thoughts and feelings for him, like, oh my god, he must be so tortured, he must be so preoccupied and whatnot. He says none of those things. She's just making it up herself. It's like, okay. After this romantic dinner, Feyre finally shows some of her pictures to Tamlin. I guess she's hidden the one with fairy pigs, because I would have liked to see those a lot more. Yeah, I know, you too, Cleo, I know. Anyway, we get to see like the sea of starlight, picture of a snowy forest from her home, and then her hut, and the scene where her dad gets his knee broken because she was present for that. But instead of the picture of the sea of starlight that Feyre put on display in the middle of the room, Tamlin says that he really wants the one with the snowy forest that more or less shows Feyre's home. But after the presentation of those pictures or paintings, Tamlin finally tells us why he really wanted to keep Feyre around. Because she showed him that she actually cared for others, which seems to be a really rare ability among fairies. And because she was ready to defend her family, I assume that's related to this, she showed him that she really cares for other people, not just herself. And he was drawn to that because he is one of the few fairies who actually cares about anybody else but himself. We have seen no real evidence of that, though. Alice clearly cares for her nieces, nephews, I forgot, but she clearly cares for them. She cared for her sister and her maid. But it would explain how Lucian and Tamlin are over the death of their friend so quickly. And then that doesn't really work with Tamlin being the one person who really cares about others, but it's not like this is the first contradiction we've encountered in the book. In that scene we find out that Feyre reminds Tamlin that he's not alone, and therefore he wanted to keep her around. Well, this chapter was short and didn't really give you much beyond like, hey, here are my paintings, so I guess we have to put the romance in somewhere. In chapter 23, Feyre and Tamlin hang out somewhere outside. Again, not in the gardens, but somewhere. In a different glen this time. And Tamlin offers to let her see, hear and experience the world as he does, but only for a price. He wants a kiss in return. And first Feyre says no, and like 2 seconds later she agrees to her own surprise. You as the reader are sitting there like, nobody's surprised, woman. Why would anybody be surprised by this? Anyway, he gives her a kiss on each eyelid, and then suddenly the world shifts and looks quite different. And suddenly she can also hear the weeping willow that they're sitting under sing. We find out that Tamlin glows in a very particular fashion. And then he tells us that this is how his brothers knew that he was becoming High Lord over them. And I'm really confused now. I thought he only became High Lord after most of his family died, or all of his family died. So which one is it? Did the powers that be choose him over his brothers and then his family died? Or I'm really confused, but again, not the first contradiction in the book. The kiss that Tamlin was promised in return ends up being on his hand, which he finds really amusing. And then for some reason, Feyre instantly wants to go to sleep and just does so under this tree. It's like, oh my god, I'm so tired. So, out like a light, and just like, is this a side effect of the magic or something? Because it's really strange. And then Tamlin curls up next to her and drops, "You're exactly as I dreamed you'd be too." You dreamed about her before? But what exactly are you talking about? I'm slightly confused here. Unless there's more to the story that we just haven't seen yet, and this is just the first hint of it, and there will be more revealed later, but I'm not holding out much hope. Chapter 24. Feyre wakes up from her nap, or her long sleep, I don't know, she's now in her bed again. But all of the glamours have lifted, and she now sees the faeries as they are. For one, Alice doesn't actually look human, but has skin like tree bark. Would have been so much more interesting to have this from the very beginning, but it would have freaked out Feyre way too much, so Tamlin hid absolutely everybody. And also, there are bunches of fairies around the estate that Feyre just didn't see before because glamour. So there are a whole set of insectoid fairies in the gardens pruning the bushes and whatnot. Just is like, hold on, all this time that I've been sneaking around the house, there were plenty of other people watching me and I just couldn't see them. Just like, yeah, a bit embarrassing, but okay. They talk about the blight again because it's on the rise and it's impacting all of the magic. But Tamlin still refuses to share any further details with Feyre, nor will he allow her to help in any way, if there is any way for her to help. Next morning, something interesting happens. The Night Court apparently snuck onto the estate and left Tamlin ahead on a spike. You know, as you do as neighbors or something. Not direct neighbors, I think, but okay. Apparently that's their definition of a prank. If they were actually up to more evil things, I suppose, they could have done a lot worse, but it was just making a point. It's like, hey, look, we managed to get onto your estate. Here, have a hat. It's like, okay. And we also learn that Lucian and Tamlin think that the whole Night Court is just made up out of sadistic torturers and killers. It's like, yeah, sure, a whole court, and every single person in there shares the same traits. Makes perfect sense. Mentioning the Night Court has Feyre bring up slaves again. And in this conversation, she reminds Tamlin that he's nothing like his father or his brothers because he was happy when the slaves were freed. And then she hits us with a line that, I don't know, that just doesn't sit right with me. You never made me feel like a prisoner. So far, so good, even though I could see why she would feel like a prisoner at first, but she's really a house guest. But then the second part of this line, never made me feel like little more than chattel. Girl, you've been a house guest. You haven't had to work a single second while you were in this house. And comparing yourself to a slave like that is just... Now, it doesn't reflect well on you. So overall, not an awful lot happens. We see some development between Feyre and Tamlin in those 3 chapters. We come across more contradictions because why wouldn't we? I just want consistent world building. Is that too much to ask? At this point, I think the book is dragging its feet a bit. I mean, yes, there is some development between the two for the relationship. But we just keep bringing up the blight without actually moving any further with that plot point. And I just wish they would get on with it. The ill-advised comparison in the last chapter aside, at least those chapters didn't annoy me all that much. I guess it's because they were short. And most of them didn't deal with much of the world building, so it couldn't let me down all that much. Anyway, unlike a lot of the chapters beforehand, this at least had 1 or 2 funny scenes in it, so that's nice. Let's hope in the next 3 chapters we actually see more of the actual world and political intrigue, because now that the Night Court is playing a role as well, maybe things will finally kick off properly. Thank you guys so much for watching me complain a little less about those chapters this time. But it's okay, I'm sure there will be more to complain about in the next part of the read-along. Like and subscribe if you want to help the channel out, and let me know in the comments what you think should have been on the cover of this book. Because we've established the cover itself is pretty ugly, I would say. I mean, the color alone, look at this, it's horrendous. Anyway, I think the little fairy pigs should have been on there instead. It would have made a great cover. Thank you guys for stopping by. I'll be back next week with another video. Bye guys! The kiss that Tamlin. And Cleo is so fed up with this book, she's leaving me over this. Cool. Screens are not for scratching. I think she didn't like Zoey in the background. And her hut and the scene where her dad gets his knee broken because she was present for that. What did Zoey do to you? Cat's been sitting there for weeks and now suddenly Zoey is an issue for you. How? Okay, she's not telling me.